on what we call Cagayan Reef, or what is internationally known as Fiery Cross Reef. Help us understand, what are the Chinese trying to do and achieve with this?
Well, to put things into perspective, the Chinese have been controlling the Fiery Cross since 1980s. So they didn't just occupy 2 years ago. But over the last 2 years, they have expanded the Fiery Cross, which is just a reef, 11 times over, and they have made it a full-fledged island. Legally speaking, that has no clear implications, but strategically speaking, that has a huge implication.
But let's talk about the timing. The recent timing. Is there anything significant that is it only because the airstrip is now complete that they're doing all these test flights, or is there a particular reason for why they're choosing this time to land these commercial jets? By the way, these are commercial jets. I guess they're trying to show that this is like a commercial airstrip. It is not an airbase in any way.
Yeah. Two things. The Chinese always try to start the year, Gregorian calendar, with a ban. Last year, over the past few years, they always come up with new announcements on future regulations. They always start with a bang. And this year, the bang was this kind of
It's like scheduled in their calendar to do something.
I don't know. It's signaling perhaps to the world that we are alive and, and our policy is kicking. And we want to assert our claims.
But it's much more than that, for sure.
The other thing is, of course, they have spent billions of dollars to build these mega engineering projects. They have a 3-kilometer long airstrip there. And the Chinese want to say, if we want to really control the skies, we can do that. We have a network of airstrip bases there. And of course, many countries, including Vietnam and the Philippines, we fear that this is just going to be a prelude for a possible imposition of air defense identification zoning. That's why even Philip Hammond, the British Foreign Secretary, said the freedom of air transport is non-negotiable. So that means even our Western allies, even our European allies, are very concerned with the implications of this Chinese movements.
Will it eventually lead to that, the ADIZ, as you mentioned?
I think
where
that is
commercial jets will have to ask permission to enter, and their signals will have to be monitored by Chinese authorities. I mean, is that the end in view of this airstrip? The Chinese, of course, the press release is that this is purely for search and rescue operations, this is for research. What do you think is the strategic objective of these airstrips?
Well, let's be honest, everyone is in a panic mode.
Okay.
Because the Chinese have shown their capability to fly major aircrafts in the area.
And they don't care about public opinion anyway.
And they always have their own spin to it. This is for civilian purposes to help with environmental issues in the region. But this is it. This is why the U.S. is trying to in a more muscular way push back against China. So soon the United States will conduct its second freedom of navigation operations within the 12 nautical miles territorial sea of Chinese occupied features. I think Mischief Reef is the next target. So the Americans are coming in. The Australians have been involved in air surveillance in the areas. And the Japanese, after spring, once their new collective security bill will be activated, can provide logistical support for the Americans. So everyone is in panic mode. And the idea there is this. We have to raise the cost for China to make them think twice. Do you want to escalate the situation? I mean, it's one thing for China to have all of the skeletal structures, airstrips, and send civilian aircrafts. It's another thing for them to deploy advanced surface-to-air missiles, advanced military platforms, and advanced aircrafts. We're not there in that nightmare scenario. And this is what we're trying to avoid. We want Xi Jinping administration trying to think twice. If you're going to keep on escalating this, you're going to trigger a counter-coalition in the region. And not only Philippines and Vietnam, really big powers like United States and Australia and Japan.
And speaking of Vietnam, Vietnam has been very vocal about the recent landings in this temporary airstrip. Actually, it's not a temporary; it's a permanent airstrip on the reef. How do we engage Vietnam better? I mean, the Philippines has been crafty in terms of getting the U.S., Japan, even Australia into this virtual coalition against China. But what about Vietnam? Although they have a similar claim to the reef.
Well, it's a tricky situation, isn't it? I mean, the Vietnamese
you want them to be partners, and yet these are the same people who are claiming the same reef.
And apparently they took away some of the features that we claimed and controlled in the 1970s. Actually, Vietnam controls the most number of features in the area, more than 21 to 24 features. So they're the most concerned because they could lose the most. They control the most amount. And they believe
And
this.
China being a historical enemy of Vietnam.
Exactly. And the thing is this. The Philippines, we have some alliance with the United States. We can debate on whether the Mutual Defense Treaty will be activated in terms of helping us in terms of our claims. But the Vietnamese do not have any kind of alliance like that. They have no great power to back them up.
They're on their own here.
Exactly. They're really on their own. That is why if you look at the Vietnamese, now they're trying to forge this strategic partnership with us. And the strategic partnership that was signed between Philippines President Tsang and President Aquino during the APEC summit, some of the provisions of that really focus on maritime security cooperation. Essentially, they're saying we are natural allies, although we used to be competitors in the region. And for now, we see China as a common threat. But of course, let's accept it. China is not the only competing claimant states. There are other competing claimant states. But in the meantime, we have to cooperate with Vietnamese. And the Vietnamese are important because they could also join the arbitration bandwagon against China. Now that we have cleared the jurisdiction obstacle, Vietnamese and even the Indonesians have been signaling that they might pursue a similar action against China. And even if they don't pursue that, they can at least credibly threaten China. So it's all about raising costs. If China keeps on doing what it's doing, we're going to send more patrols into the area, we're going to sue you in the court, we're going to embarrass you diplomatically. It's all about raising the cost. And in Chinese thinking, they have the concept called "xi," which means alignment of forces. And we want to make it clear to China that the forces will disalign against you if you keep on doing what you're doing.
All right, you talked about everyone being in panic mode, and rightly so. I mean, the tensions are rising in the West Philippine Sea or the South China Sea. But speaking about panic mode, it would seem like the Communist Party of China would be in a panic mode as well. The economy is tanking. Stock market in China is sinking. The yuan has depreciated significantly. I mean, you know, these are scary signs for many geopolitical experts. When you take a look at these situations in countries, this is when they do a lot of these. They try to get, you know, the nation behind the party, behind the government, by being more aggressive in their foreign policy. I mean, is this going to complicate matters worse?
Well, Mr. Xi Jinping, President of China, is between a rock and a hard place. The rock is this international coalition forming against China. He's recognizing that. That's why when he was in the White House last year, he said, we're not going to militarize the disputes, essentially saying we're not going to deploy advanced military assets to the area. But he's also against a hard place, and that hard place is domestic hardline constituency within the PLA Navy, within the Coast Guard, within the Hainan government. So there are a lot of lobby groups who want China to play a more important
discontent
role.
in the public as well.
And the discontent in the public is huge because when China had the market crash last year, the first market crash in June, Xi Jinping was nowhere to be found. And the Chinese people were asking, where's our leader? Where is the assurance that he has to give us? And then China reacted with panic also. You know, they engaged in this draconian measure, suspending trading and putting all of these kinds of caps on trading, etc. And it didn't show much, depth, and strength in terms of how they deal with economic crisis. So Mr. Xi Jinping, unfortunately, is not in a very strong position. And that's not a good news for us because insecure leaders in big countries tend to compensate by becoming more aggressive abroad. So ironically, we need China to stabilize its economy so that Mr. Xi Jinping will be confident enough to make adjustments in his foreign policy.
It's a very tricky situation.
Right. So what's essentially happening is actually, for me, I think Xi Jinping's priority is to oversee the transition of China towards a more sustainable, consumer-based, innovation-based economy.
Fix the economy first.
And if he wants to do that, he has to have tremendous amount of political capital. And unfortunately...
And allies around the world.
Well, and in an era of popular nationalism in China, many Chinese people believe they really own all of these areas, South China Sea and East China Sea and West Philippine Sea. So he unfortunately needs to pander to that popularist nationalist constituency in order to have enough political capital to push the economic transition. So he has a very instrumentalist, actually, approach to foreign policy. I really don't see Xi Jinping as, I see him quite sophisticated to realize that China is not going to get all that it wants without triggering a possible conflict. But at the same time, the point is this: he's still weak at home, the economy is not doing well, so unfortunately he's still pandering to these nationalist constituencies by showing toughness abroad. That is why when they landed the airstrip, you could see all of these kinds of efforts to show that we control this area and to project toughness towards the domestic public.